Department. We are thrilled that you're here, and we're thrilled to be offering this event, this question and answer session, with Mr. Randy Spendlove, the president of Motion Picture Music with Paramount Pictures and DreamWorks. So at this time, let's give him a warm welcome.
I always loved music, and I always loved film, and to be able to work in an industry that combines both of those mediums into one art form is truly amazing, and I'm grateful for it. To be able to work in film music, to me, is one of the greatest experiences of my life.
As president of Motion Picture Music, Randy Spendlove oversees all aspects of music for Paramount and DreamWorks Pictures. Following the success of Transformers, Spendlove is working closely on this year's biggest films, including J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, Mike Myers' The Love Guru, Marvel Comics' Iron Man, and Steven Spielberg's highly anticipated Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull.
You know, right now John Williams is in the studio scoring Indiana Jones, and so when you have a recording studio with Steven Spielberg and John Williams and 102 musicians, it truly is one of the most amazing and powerful experiences you'll ever see.
As music producer, Spendlove won a Grammy Award in 2004 for Chicago. The soundtrack went on to stunning success, selling 3 million copies worldwide. His work on Cold Mountain received a Grammy nomination, while Finding Neverland and Aviator each took home Golden Globes for music.
The challenge with Dreamworks was taking a musical, the material that was already written, and finding a way to update it to make it relevant. It was basically the story of Motown.
What you need is a brain. Now I can give it to you. My mom died.
Anytime you work on a musical and you're spending your time telling the story with the music, which is much more difficult than this having a song at the end of a movie. I get inspired by the music just as it is. It's really difficult to say what is your favorite form of music when you work in all genres. To me, the quality of the music is what really matters. And when I am in the presence of greatness, I'm truly inspired by how profound they can be with their music. You gotta believe in yourself. You gotta believe in the music. You gotta believe in what you can do, and you gotta not let anybody tell you that you can't follow your dream.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome.
People generally do ask me is what do I do, and how do they also get involved in the music business. I spent a lot of time talking to college kids about just that, and to get to the point of about what I do, really is I wear a lot of hats, and part of my job is a record producer or a music producer. There aren't many records anymore, or CDs for that matter. But part of my time is spent as an executive in meetings at Paramount, where we go over and strategize about what we're going to do overall for our movies in terms of marketing and release, and what we're going to do to make our movies. Part of that time is spent in the recording studio with composers, making sure that we're getting the music we need for the film and that's servicing the film. Occasionally, a composer can overwrite a scene or overwrite the music and such, and it's not supporting the film. And we sometimes remind people that we're here supporting what the director's vision is and not writing their own particular piece. A film composer's job is to support what's on screen. Part of my time is spent in a dub room with a music editor and a picture editor, deciding what songs and what music fit into a movie, and trying to find just that right emotion that will carry a scene through. And part of it is in a rock and roll setting where we're with Linkin Park and trying to negotiate a deal so that they'll write a song for Transformers, and we can benefit each other by bringing the marketing benefit of a movie to the band and bringing the cool factor and the audience that the band has to our film. Yeah. So all those things. Oh, and then there's a very large part of my day which is dealing with clearance and licensing and the business end of music, where we will be negotiating with publishing companies and record companies for uses of their songs in our movies or with artists, and what's called the clearance process, which is if you're an artist and you want to get a song, or we want a song in a film, we have to clear that with the writers and get all the writers to sign off. And we have a host of lawyers that work on that on a daily basis. I started at Paramount close to 2 years ago.
Great. So you mentioned Linkin Park as being one of the current artists that you partnered with for a movie. Are there any other current artists that you're partnering with? Well,
we're in discussions with My Chemical Romance for something right now. We're talking to Linkin Park again about Transformers 2. We are busy sort of creating a band. We have an English picture, sort of a Bridget Jones' Diary done in a teen setting. And we auditioned. We went to colleges, went to the Music Academy in Brighton, England, and auditioned students to play the band in this movie. And there's a band written into the script. They're part of the acting of it all. So, but the great thing is the band was so good. We recorded them at Abbey Road, made a record, and Sony signed them. So now they're an actual band on Sony, and they're going to have a career far, apart from the movie, which is pretty cool.
Wow.
My name is Dave Fabian. I used to run the Steinberg organization here in the Americas, Cubase and Windows. Now, you mentioned a number of my former clients.
Which ones?
James Newton Howard.
Oh, great, yeah.
William Gregson, Hans Zimmer.
Right.
A lot of them did their movie scores basically with a computer and racks full of samples, as opposed to John Williams, who hired 120 of Hollywood's finest.
Right.
How do you see that as a trend, and as a producer, do you hear a difference in their product?
It's a great question, and there are definitely different approaches. Some are more traditional and orchestral, such as Dario Marinelli's score for Atonement that won the Oscar this year. Hans is one of the first guys that combined the idea of MIDI and an underpinning of MIDI sounds, that sort of pulse that's done electronically with the orchestra. When you listen to the Pirates of the Caribbean score, there's this, there's a synth part underneath the orchestra, and he likes to blend them, and that's an art form itself. Trevor Rabin's score for National Treasure, he does the same thing. Anybody that comes out of that Jerry Bruckheimer camp will combine MIDI and real orchestra. It's not very often that we do only MIDI. Occasionally, but that's going to be sort of a thing. You're going to actually be doing some kind of electronic score in some movie, like Garden State or something where you want that. But I think the combination is very cool. What we are seeing, though, is smaller orchestras. Instead, we'll bring in, you know, a 30-piece string section and then lay those over the MIDI tracks. And the other thing is they have to use those MIDI tracks early so we can actually hear what it's going to sound like, and then we'll take it to the recording after so that we already have approved basically what the score is going to be before we start recording.
Does that simplify the process a lot?
It does. The old days was tougher because composers would write pen to paper, and basically by the time you're in the recording studio, you're done. So if it's not working, and back then the composers were like, well, you know, it's the way I hear it, you know, and you sort of had to live with that, and that could be problematic. About when I started at Miramax, about 10 or 12 years ago, we had Jerry Goldsmith and some of the guys who still work that way. And, but I think now the process is pretty much changed.
What do you do to say to a screenwriter who maybe writes a movie set in the 60s or 70s, he wants to put particular songs into his script, and you basically have the final say on that?
That's another excellent question. It happens all the time. It's not as though I have the final say. I'm not saying I'm the keeper of the greatest taste in music. It's, unfortunately, this comes down to a more brass tacks level, which is how are we going to pay for it? And we did a movie at Miramax a long time ago called A Walk in the Moon, and it had tons of A Walk on the Moon. Tons of music from that era. And the problem is any music, when we get into the business side of things, that you've heard of is expensive. Anything that you haven't heard of is cheap. And it's pretty easy. So we get these young filmmakers, and they go, yeah, I wrote in, you know, the Doors, and I wrote in the Who, and I wrote in the Stones, and it's perfect. You know, and we never, even from Marty Scorsese, who's the only guy who gets the Rolling Stones and happens to put it in every single movie. He's the only guy that can afford them. Yeah, I mean, the technology has changed over the last 10 years, as most of you, any of you who are musicians, I'm sure you are aware of, and work in Pro Tools and Digital Performer and Logic. The mixing process is just so crazy now because it's so much of it is subbed out in advance before we ever take it to the dub stage. We mix everything into stems musically, so we'll knock 35 or 36 or 42 tracks down to 8 and then take that to the dub stage. But really everything's digital, everything's computer run. You still have to use your ears, and I hope people continue to do it the way you did and do. But it's, so much of it is now guys looking, into gear and really determining how much and how that fits into the waveforms. But it is definitely a part of our business now, and just like editing has changed from the days when editors used to edit on film. Music is, the changeover from tape into digital has had a lot of advantages. There were a lot of disadvantages early on, and I think the quality wasn't there early on. But I think now the bit rate has gotten high enough that it's become the norm, and I don't see it ever going back to tape. But my experience from like the USC students and the UCLA students, we speak there once a year to all of the scoring students, and I asked the question because I was curious about what people were preferring, and most of the string players and flute players and things preferred DP. When Robert and I were in junior high, we had a band teacher by the name of Mr. Hopkins. Remember Mr. Hopkins? Remember him? Okay. Mr. Hopkins, Robert and I were playing in a jazz combo, and I remember at some point, I wanted to play drums, and I wanted to play bass, and I wanted to play, I was kind of ADD, and I was a little hyperactive too, and so it's like, I could play piano, and I could, and he did look at me, and he goes, Spenlove, he goes, and we've all heard it, he's like, you're a jack of all trades, and he shook his finger in my face and said, but a master of none, and he was really, and I remember it affected me in a big way, but I thought, well, is that a hugely bad thing? Because is it great? Yes, I'd like to be really good at one thing, but I'd also like to be pretty darn good at a lot of things, I think. So I'm not saying there's a case for either one. I think when I see these people that are masters at their instruments, and I see them now, and They blow me away. I'm a pretty good guitar player. I do sessions with guys that are real guitar players, and you don't even want to have a guitar near you, because you just like, Michael Thompson, and these guys are insane. Session players, masters, can't make pancakes in the morning, but can play guitar. So that's one very amazing, successful path, and I support it highly, because that's a level I don't know I could achieve. But I thought learning how to do a lot of things at once and multitasking was also a very good way, and that's what worked for me, and everybody's different. In terms of what I look for with people, when I'm hiring them for an executive job, it's an interesting thing. I look for, well, a lot of people, I think it comes down to who you are. I look for character, and I look for, how well you can probably multitask, now that I think about it, because that is a big part of what we do. We have a lot going on, and you have to be, when I say character, you also have to be able to withstand quite a bit. It's a tough business. I mean, you get crushed. When there are millions of dollars on the line and you make a mistake and it lands on your desk, it lands on your head. And so I think being able to take pressure and be able to multitask, and you can kind of sort out pretty quickly those that are cut out for a cooker like that.
One person's supposed to come from like a place like West Valley College, not specifically me, but if it were.
Right? Right? No, I understand. Well, it's like coming from Gilroy High School, which is. I understand that. I get asked it at everything I ever speak at. The answer, and I don't want to sound too cliche, is exactly you need to find the doors and kick them down. There are a lot of young composers that by the time they reach my desk already have agents and things of that nature. And still it's difficult, but it's not impossible. And I say that because I want to drive that point home. It's always possible. And there are a couple of, specifics. One is, if I were a composer, what I would be doing now is finding a young filmmaker, find somebody who's in film school and say, I can score your movie. He's going to be a filmmaker looking for music. You're a person who makes music you guys can benefit each other, because you want to start developing, at the very least, a reel of music to picture. So that's one thing that you can do now. And by the way, you can do it, the technology is such, again, that you can do that so easily. You can go out and shoot and cut on your Mac and score it yourself. So anything you can do, it still happens where people get discovered off of those things. The internet is your friend. Once again, it's like, we did a movie with Akiva, what's his name? The guys on SNL, Andy Samberg and Akiva, can't remember his name. They directed a movie called Hot Rod for us. And we found them because they did that short. They did that short Dick in the Box, which maybe people remember, right? That was them. So those guys ended up getting a film deal at Paramount because it's part of pop culture. What we're looking for, where we're all stiff and don't know and wearing suits, and we're looking for people that know what the kids want. And when I say kids, I only mean it that if you're connected to that culture, and then you're an expert, and then you can relay that information to people who need to know, who have lost touch of that, you become very valuable. Another specific is, find a filmmaker, utilize the internet, and film music is done in Los Angeles. That's another really important factor. It is unusual for film composers to be outside of Los Angeles. It's not impossible, and there are some European guys, and there are a couple guys in New York, but those are the guys we know. I would say honestly, if your goal is to be a film composer, then Los Angeles is the place you're going to need to live, and then at least you're swimming in the right pond, and then you can start networking, meeting people, finding other film students at the Los Angeles Film Academy, finding agents and managers, And there's so many things that need music now. All kinds of internet things need music. Not just commercials, but there are television commercials and TV shows, but there's all kinds of things on the internet, so you just keep building.
Now you transition to Miramax. Is that right?
That is true.
Okay, so
That
let's
is true.
talk about the transition from A&M to Miramax
Alright.
and what evolves with Miramax.
This is kind of a funny story that young people can heed. But I was working at A&M, and I wanted to move into film music. I sort of felt that I had gone as far as I can go in promotion, and I was getting away from my own production. I was no longer making music. I was only kind of promoting it. And so I was really interested in working in film. And I started reaching out and finding out what anybody would have to do who wants to change careers. And I found somebody that knew Harvey Weinstein. So I found somebody, and I said, you gotta get me in to see him. Now, the thing that was different about that was that I actually had a job. I knew that there was a job open. So it wasn't like I just said, I just need to attack this guy and he's got nothing for me, which happens to me sometimes now. But I met with Harvey Weinstein, and that was a pretty intense meeting. He's a big guy, and I was 29 maybe. We sat down, and he's just like you would expect, or if you watch Entourage or anything, he's smoking, chain smoking, and we're sitting at a fancy place. And he asked me, we had about an hour interview, but the last thing he said to me was, after I told him why I should be running his music department and what I thought I could do, which I thought was a very compelling case, he came back to me and said, all I care about is, can you get Paul McCartney on the phone right now if I hand you a phone? And I went, yes, I can. I just lied my ass off and said, I was gonna fake it till I thank God he didn't hand me a phone. But the point of the story was that I think, first of all, I think he knew I was lying. I wasn't really lying. I was just basically saying I'll do anything that, there's no job that I wouldn't dive into. And I think he looked at that as a very interesting quality that so he was asking me something that was impossible and asking me if I could do it. And basically, whether I couldn't do it or could do it, I would have found a way. I got in front of him, which he thought was fairly remarkable at the time. So it comes back to, if you're going for a job or you want to work in a particular industry, letting nothing deter you away from. I was utterly focused of getting out of A&M and getting into this business, and I would have done just about anything legal, but in terms of what my commitment was to him, I think he saw it at that point.
With regards to the business side of film composition and film music, is it a 100% buyout now? I mean, you mentioned you have the scores in the back. Today, do you actually, John Williams or a big production like that, do you just pay him a flat rate and you own the music, or is there points involved with the soundtrack?
It's a great question. The answer is yes. When you score a movie for and this is good for you aspiring musicians and film people, we own it all. We do pay you a fee, and if it's John Williams, it's a really big one. But
No points on the album sales?
well, record sales, and we can talk about it, record sales is virtually non-existent because CDs are virtually, as we all know, in the record business, and I can do hours on that, but it's the CD business is declining at such a rate that there is no longer really much of a CD business. That doesn't mean there's not a music business. There is a music business, and anybody that wants to be in the music business, it's just going to be done differently, and how people receive their music is going to be differently. But when you score a movie, we own the master recording and we own the publishing, and then we can license it back to Coca-Cola commercials later on. But but yes, you do get points on the record. And in terms of it might be an iTunes CD, you're still getting your normal performance royalties and your normal performance bonus. That's a good question. We own the copyright. We own the material from start to bottom for 50 years, and then reverts back when it becomes public domain.
What advice would you give to a film director when working with composers or musicians and stuff?
what happens with young directors that are not really connected to music quite a bit is they will need to trust their composer a little bit. It's true, they sometimes, you know, when Bill Condon did Dreamgirls, he was a director that arguably was doing a musical and said to me when he hired me, I really don't know anything about the music, so I'm relying on you to deliver something that's hopefully good, hopefully great. So in terms of that, that's what you need to do. And as you become, as you're directing things, you're going to get more familiar with how things work. Now there are sort of academics to it all. There's comedy and there's suspense and there's romance and there's things like that become very genre oriented, and you'll sort of know how those things fit as a young director. In terms of directors that I've worked with that are very musical or ones I liked, I mean, Quentin Tarantino is probably the most musical because, and listen, there's not much I'm doing for that guy. That guy already knows what he wants, and he already's plucked it out of his own vinyl collection and writes it into the script. And so then our job is just how do we clear it and how do we get it for him, which is a hard part. Robert Rodriguez is a guy that is a musician and a guitar player, and he plays and you know, he can play guitar and then work with an orchestrator who can help turn that into score. And he did that a couple times, and now he's orchestrating himself. It's pretty amazing. So those are pretty musical guys. Obviously, Marty Scorsese is a very musical guy. So it's interesting. Music's very subjective, though. It's your taste.
So my question is, for our vocal students, what sort of pathway do they have to take if they're interested in doing studio work as a vocalist, and what kind of skills do they need? You know, how long are the sessions? How much time do they have to practice? That sort of thing.
Well, to answer that backwards, the skills you need, you got to be incredibly on top of your chops, because nobody waits. When we go into a scoring session, and this goes for all the instruments, and I'll bring it back to the choral guys, but the music goes down at 9 o'clock, the music goes out, the conductor hits the stand, and they play every cue. Never a rehearsal, never a let's warm up with a time through, let's take it. And it's amazing to me, it's shocking to me that it's perfect, because those guys are masters and they do it perfectly. In terms of what you need, and that goes for every instrument in the room, you read and you don't divert from the page. In terms of the choral guys, it's the same thing. You also have to read. And most of the choral music in film are oohs and ahs and a little Latin now and again, but it's, in terms of rock and roll or any kind of session work, it's a network of people down, you know, again, it's in Los Angeles, but it's also in San Francisco. I would start in San Francisco, I would start doing jingles, and I would start by doing, all of the contemporary, anything that you can get your hands on. People need real players, so getting as much done that you can is important. And then when you get down to Los Angeles, you get into that world just like it would be any other sort of business world, where you find the people that are good and you network with them and you get in with them and you start doing sessions. And as far as the choral stuff for movie scores, same thing applies with the contractors. You want to get with the contractors who hire, and they're looking for good people too.
I just want to say, true to his last name, you are always gracious and very generous with your time and your energy, helping family and friends and those who want a helping hand. So a very, very heartfelt thank you. And folks, if we want Randy to come back sometime, can we please give him a big West Valley thank you.
West Valley, all right, buddy. Thank you, man. That was fun, huh? Thanks, man.